Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Dr. Martin, let me start with you. And by the way, because we have relatively small number of members, we may be able to do a second round. Nonetheless, I'm going to ask, I've got 3 questions and would just ask for quick answers. Dr. Martin, you said something that stuck with me. At the end of your testimony, you said, find better ways to integrate rural and urban infrastructure. Very intriguing. Can you give me a minute of elaboration on what exactly that means and maybe an example of where it's being done?
Certainly, Chairman Hines. And the video that we saw at the beginning describing Milwaukee Transit ending at the county line is a great example of this. The benefits of integrating rural and urban economies are inherently integrated. There is no doubt about that. The question is, how well does infrastructure support that integration? And certainly, from water delivery systems through transit being the most obvious, there are many opportunities to do a better job of that kind of integration. And that also involves being very innovative about the kinds of transit systems that we want. So not just simply surface transportation, but also rail, and a variety of other options that we have that can better integrate and allow people to reduce their transit time and costs. So I can think of a gazillion examples on the transit side. Certainly the extensions of roads that we're mentioning in the Miami-Dade County is one example. The investments in not just in the surface road that came out of the Infrastructure Act, but also the public transit that better ensures that that access is allowable for rural communities to partake of and participate in. Now, just the other note, that's not only employment, but also trade, because obviously things from rural communities have to come to urban communities like food. So these are important transit routes.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Dr. Turner-Lee, I have a question for you. One of the things I will never forget of the COVID experience is, at least in my district, which is pretty densely populated, getting the wire or the service to a lower income or an unwired family in some ways was the easy part. Again, it's a fairly densely packed district. And I'm confident that with the investment we're making, the subsidies and the money we're putting into making sure that all Americans have access to broadband, but that will happen. But the thing that sticks with me is that that's really in some ways the least part of the challenge. So I have an immigrant-heavy community. Many times you have parents who are not terribly fluent in English. You have young children who I find it hard enough to, hook up my own modems and that sort of thing. So it sort of felt to me like getting the wire to the household was the easy part. It's the maintenance, it's the IT function. My question to you is, if you agree with me, what are examples of programs or municipalities or companies that are doing a good job at addressing that other piece of making sure people have access to broadband?
You know what, Chairman, it's very hard because I think all of us have had Post-it notes up and we've not really come up with a really good repository of what's actually worked. To your point, I think what we're actually finding in communities that are very culturally different and racially different is the examples that what you're talking about. We've relied upon anchor institutions, faith-based institutions that have helped families navigate the digital divide. We've actually seen community-based organizations that have essentially helped with language proficiencies. The challenge that we have is these level of digital navigators are nowhere in this bill, and they're not necessarily someplace in Corporation for National Service, which I've actually advocated for. What I'd like to see, just to close up based on what you said, is I think we need a comprehensive approach to digital literacy. Right now, the infrastructure bill, we about $2 billion. Perhaps we need to think about leveraging other assets in the Corporation for National Service or in education, where we could actually train people to be local ambassadors in their community. Because as you said, relevance is still a concern among communities, and particularly among the Latino community, there's a fear of transparency or putting out enough information. And I have several examples of that across the country as well. So we got to do a better job when it comes to digital literacy and not focus just on supply.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Turner-Lee. This is something I'm going to want to follow up on because I, in my position of ignorance here, I'm not in a place to make obvious or recommendations, but things like AmeriCorps, community-based organizations, as you said, faith institutions, I wonder if there's not a way to get them more active on this issue, because again, we can put the wire in and the modem into the home, but when it goes wrong, that person may as well not have the wire and the modem. I am almost out of time, but I do suspect we'll have an opportunity for a second round, but I do want to get the other members an opportunity to ask questions. But my next question, it was really, I was struck, Ms. Higgins and Mr. Crabtree, you both made the point that we need to do a better job at streamlining the approval process. And, these approval processes exist for a reason, in that everybody gets to sort of speak up around environmental concerns. We don't want our infrastructure destroying communities. They exist for a reason, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be more efficient and more rapid. And so when I come back around on my second round, I'm going to ask you both to offer up examples and suggestions for how we can do that. With that, I will yield back and recognize the ranking member for his questions.